What is Trump doing? How is he combating this? Is he in it to win it? Well, maybe. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. Trump is now, quote, holding far fewer rallies than in past runs. And this data, honestly, that's pretty shocking, especially if you're comparing it to the 2016 campaign. So by the numbers, Trump had 72 rallies between June and September of 2016. He has held 24 in this period this year, with another on the calendar for today. So he will soon ramp up his schedule, quote, with multiple rallies per week in the final stretch of the campaign. That's according to his own advisors. But look, in 2016, he had 69 in the entire month of October and in early November, taking the stage as many as 5 times a day.
That's crazy.
In
That's
the stretch
actually
run.
crazy.
That is crazy. And honestly, look, he did the same thing in 2020. Even though it was literally during the pandemic, he had 43 in the 5 weeks leading up to Election Day. You and I remember those because what they were is they had that thing where he would arrive in an airplane hangar and he would just get off the plane and he would immediately go to the stage because they would have the stage inside of an airplane hangar. That's probably what they'll continue to do. But the current schedule does not indicate any of that. And that is a real issue. Now, of course, he's certainly had a lot more energy back in 2016 because he was coming off of a successful primary run, but he fought for it and he barely won in 2016.
Yeah.
So that is an indication to me. At the same time, his fundraising, it's a problem now versus Kamala Harris. Remember, he had a major edge over Joe Biden, but now that Kamala's in the race, let's put this in there. What we see right now is that there's some $150 million shortfall versus Kamala in just the month of August. I mean, Kamala, the big money on the Democratic side this time is insane. It's like Obama, $4 million in a single night out of Hollywood. Kamala, 20-something million. $25 million fundraisers were like unheard of, like what, 5 years ago? Now they're the norm. They happen all the time. And she is raising just an absolute ton, $189 million in August, while Trump raises just $44.5 million. Harris shook up what was previously a more evenly matched cash race where both Biden had 284, Trump had 217 at the end of the month in June. That was the totals in the coffers, not what they were fundraising. But he's always been a major fundraising juggernaut online. But Kamala, she's got a lot of money. There's a ton of major Democratic elite enthusiasm she will not want for anything going into this. And it might just be the difference whenever it comes down to it.
Yeah, and obviously she's also had much more success grassroots fundraising than Biden. That's been one of the primary differences between their fundraising in particular. It's possible that this is less reflective of a true overall cash disparity and more reflective of a different campaign strategy. So increasingly campaigns are outsourcing a lot of their even field work, paid communications, like what used to be seen as sort of core campaign functions to outside entities that face fewer restrictions and on the use of their money, and some of them, if they don't directly advocate for a candidate, even take in dark money, don't have to disclose it, et cetera, et cetera. And the Trump campaign seems to have outsourced some of those key functions. It's actually the strategy, remember, Ron DeSantis used in the primary campaign. Didn't work out that well for him, but could certainly work out fine for Trump, who has demonstrated no issues, certainly turning out his folks consistently when it is time for them to show up and pull the lever for Donald Trump. So I would take this with a grain of salt. I think it does show, I think Kamala Harris is probably doing more fundraisers, working this a little bit harder. To me, it's more an indication of Trump kind of, he's not doing as much of the work that he used to do. But it's also, going back to the rallies point, it was interesting to me the excuses that the campaign gave, or the rationale the campaign gave for why he was doing fewer rallies. They gave three primary reasons that he's doing fewer rallies. Number one, they said he's a known quantity. Campaign feels less need to define him or his candidacy for voters this time around. True, he is a known quantity. That is true. The Harris people feel, I think, the same way about, okay, people already know. Maybe we need to remind people of who he is and some of his worst flaws that they didn't like. But in general, you're not really going to move people that much on what they think about Donald Trump. But it ignores the fact that you also have a chance at these rallies to define Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in a way that you have so far failed to do. And, part of the magic of his 2016 strategy is that the rallies fed into a media strategy that allowed him to grab hold of narratives time and time again in a way that ended up being favorable for him, and that drove a message that was, very critical of Hillary and that really took hold and really landed with the American public. So that's one. The second reason they give is that rallies are expensive.
Yeah.
Which, true, but I mean, it kind of reminds me of, remember back in 2016, Saagar, there was a lot of criticism of the Trump rally strategy.
Yeah, tons.
And they said things like, oh, rallies are really expensive and oh, crowd size doesn't matter, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I don't know, like, obviously you sort of proved that this strategy works for you before. Now getting cost conscious about it, that was interesting to me.
There's a human element too.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, we're all ignoring. Trump has literally been shot at. He got shot in the head. Also, somebody tried to kill him.
But even before that,
yeah,
he wasn't doing as many.
It would be weird not to be afraid to do a rally. He's doing a rally, on October 5th in Butler on the site of where the attempted assassination happened. But a lot of people keep pointing that out for the criticism. They're like, hey, people are shooting at him. He's like, I mean, look, I would be afraid too.
Absolutely.
Somebody's trying to kill me. And so, I mean, you can't really put that aside. So that's certainly part of it. I mean, I guess the other one would be
Well, the other thing they say is he's older and more inclined to spend his time at Mar-a-Lago, which I think is probably true too. Like, he just doesn't want to do it anymore. He doesn't want to do the debate. He doesn't want to do as many rallies. It's exhausting. And,
Trump was famously a
reality.
homebody even in 2016. So he would have a rally in Nevada, and while any other candidate would just pass out in Nevada, he'd get on the jet and go home to New York just to sleep in his own bed. I sympathize with that. I totally get it. But, sometimes being on the campaign trail, that's not always the most practical thing. And he burned a lot of jet fuel doing that. I remember reading so many articles about it because people were like, it's just such a crazy way to do business. But really what it means, I think this time around, he's prioritizing himself. I think he feels a little bit more comfortable, per se, this time around, more set in his own ways. Doesn't feel like he has to fight as much. And look, he may be right. Right now he's got a 50-50 shot. And if he does end up winning, then all of this convo will really have been for naught, and he would have had a pretty comfortable run, so to speak. I guess, putting aside him literally getting shot, but putting all that aside, like, he would not have had to have worked as hard for the presidency as most people have to their first time around. So I'm actually curious. I really don't know where it's going to go.
There was one other piece that's been interesting.
Oh, the Melania thing.
Yeah, which is Melania is absent.
She's totally
from the
MIA.
campaign.
It's weird.
They wanted her to speak at the RNC. Apparently they tried to die. She's like, no. The most I'll do is show up, and like, you're lucky I'm doing that, basically. She's not on the campaign trail at all. She's writing a new memoir about herself. She just did this really out of left field video about how, like, responding to criticism of her nude modeling, which I haven't heard any criticism of her nude modeling in like a decade, but
I was going to say that was a very
it came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
and then it lasted like one news cycle.
She just wrote a book or something. Listen, I don't know.
But anyway, it all feels very like, it's about her and her life and her journey, which I'm sure is interesting in its own regard, but it's very much not really about her husband or his quest for the White House, et cetera. And there was this news item that is quite curious. So she was apparently paid almost $250,000 to speak to the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a group of gay Republicans. She delivered speeches at 2 fundraisers, which is noteworthy in and of itself because, again, she's really not doing anything on the campaign trail for her husband. The Log Cabin Republican president told CNN his group wasn't the one that paid for her appearance, and the form that revealed this payment to her didn't provide details on the payment. So we actually don't know who put up the cash, which is, noteworthy and important in and of itself in terms of transparency, sunlight, all of that. But it's also just, another interesting look. I do feel like if you had any other politician out there, right, if Kamala Harris's husband or if Joe Biden's wife or whatever were like pretty clearly didn't actually care that much whether their spouse won or lost, I think it would be more of a conversation. But with Trump, again, it's just one of these things that people are like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, look, I think it's definitely weird, but it's not like Trump has always had the most normal personal life. so look, I covered her. She's an enigma. That's the only way I can put it. She's a true enigma. She tried her hand at being a more traditional first lady, the whole Be Best campaign, which I'll never forget. I was there. Yeah, wow. Wild moment.
Remember when she wore that jacket to the border?
I really don't care. Do you? Is that what it said?
Something like that.
Something like, I really don't care. Do you? Yeah, that was a big moment. And she eventually just basically retreated into herself, and she's like, I don't care about any of this anymore. I can't really blame her. I mean, in a certain sense, a lot of these politicians' wives, you get dragged to a life that you never wanted. I mean, It's
I'm
really
sure she did not think when she was marrying Donald Trump that this was her future.
no.
She thought, I get to be trophy wife.
Yeah.
I get to hang out, have my dual life in Mar-a-Lago and in New York City.
And that's a pretty good
like
life.
raise my son in peace and whatever, and do the little things that I want to do, but that's it. You know?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them, it's honestly sad. If you read between the lines of Obama's book and Michelle Obama's book, there's some pretty brutal admissions of Obama being like, I'm running for office, and Michelle's like begging him, like, please don't do it.
Want him
and he just did it. And she was like, okay, then my mom has to live with us. And he's like, no, I don't want that. And she has to lay down the law. She hated being first lady by most accounts. So I don't know. Look, that's between them, in terms of the way that they conduct business. But yeah, it's not all that uncommon, I guess, to fall into something like this. But it is noteworthy. I mean, I feel bad for her in a certain sense. It's clearly she does not want this life. She doesn't want this life at all.
Yeah, I think that has been made very abundantly clear.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.